you're staring at him.
The bad guy.
We were signing in, it takes a second. Now, there's a line out front.
I checked my gun.
Oh, gosh. Troublemaker.
I'm glad you did check your. Well, thanks, guys, for coming. We got this, Jason, were you able to? Thank you. Look at that.
That's Jason.
All right, so just a couple welcoming remarks. I think it was called in the agenda. There's actually agendas right by the door on the chair. There are a whole bunch of them if you need them. But, they're pretty sparse because we'll go into the details of them, but, welcome to this meeting. I want to go through some intros and some changes in personnel here. So one, I want to welcome back, Jim Whitmer. So he's now the DED Division Chief. So he steps in, hits the road running from being here 10 years before, and then doing his own thing on the outside like you guys for 5 years or so. So he's the Division Chief. Julia Sauer has been accepted the promotion for the Zoning Chief. And I believe they're working on some other hires down there still.
Yeah, so we are looking to hire another regulation inspectors. That's been determined, but we wanted to get the new chief position when Jeff Gomes left in April. Julie was acting chief for several months, and then we hired her to be the new chief in the zoning division. As well as, not sure how many of you all had any touch points with Peter Conrad, who was here for almost about 10 years in the zoning division, doing the zoning regulation amendments, zoning map amendments, and then processing any variances, did some of the internal administrative hearings and the Board of Appeals process, hearing examiner processes, things like that. With his retirement left a vacancy, and so we're also hiring for that planner and 30 supervisor position for supervise the processes of the planners there. So we got a couple of new changes happening there as well.
And we have
I'm
a,
sorry, go ahead.
He's handling that. And is Peter going already?
Yeah, Peter left at the end of June. So that's being handled by Hannah Weber and Justin Tyler under the supervision of Julia.
so speaking of that, in the back is,
Hannah
yep, it's
Weber.
Hannah there. If you can, and Everett, if you guys can stand up, just kind of introduce yourself, tell them what you do and why they would need to call you or you would call them.
I'm Hannah Weber. I started with the county in January. Prior to that, I was with Carroll County for about 5 years in their planning and zoning department. As Linda mentioned, I am in the zoning division. So along with what Peter was doing, we do all of the zoning regulation amendments, the map amendments, conditional use petitions, everything that goes to the hearing examiner, things like that. So look forward to working with you guys.
Good afternoon, my name is Brenda Jones. I'm code enforcement inspector just across the way in the planning and zoning department. Is everyone pretty familiar with what code enforcement entails? He knows. It's like, basically we ensure compliance, with federal, state and local ordinances and codes. It can vary from city to county in terms of what the issues are. I've been here about 2 months. I'm originally from the West Coast, so I was doing code enforcement there, and it varies quite a bit. It's interesting, some of the issues and some of the things we enforce here and what's a priority. So we are available, you guys have any questions. Usually, as far as here, we really expect to have to contact you guys. And, because usually we deal with the property owners themselves, but if there's something you were building and you were in charge and holding out for while you were process, we might reach out to you in regards to something with the property and maintenance or what have you. So we are available. You're welcome to call. I didn't mean to talk too long, but feel free to come by if you have any questions or what have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about my recent trip to Moab for the next couple of minutes because Beth just informed me and I peeked out there. There's like 6 people trying to get signed in that are coming in here. So I had a great trip to Moab. No, I'm kidding. Not to get me going. What's that? Not in Moab. No, it was just Mountain Lake.
Hey, Moab, that's in Baltimore County, right?
Little further west, but, it was a great job. I do want to wait just a moment or so. Hopefully they can get, signed in quickly.
Actually, Jason Linker, do you know, do we have the Al, can people see us or just hear us?
They can see us, but the camera is right there.
They're only seeing this
Yeah.
half.
Side of Chris's head.
Ah,
Looking good.
oh, we got some more troublemakers coming in now.
All developers are troublemakers. That's just what we do.
I know.
That's our job. That's why I guess it's really starting to get that out.
If you sit in the front, you kind of get, look, you know.
Yeah, right, they'll-
It's like sport.
Happening in the back. Do you want to talk about some other announcements too? We've also had some other announcements.
You can talk about that one.
Okay, all right. We've had some other announcements within our Division of Land Development. We've had some restructuring, in the last month. So we had a new department created within Howard County Department of General Services, which was actually came out of, Public Works, so Real Estate Services and our Facilities Division. And with that, they needed a planner. And so a decision was made with restructuring part of our department. So Anthony Cataldo, who was our former chief of land development, he's no longer with us. He actually was tapped to be part of that new group. So it's a really great, exciting opportunity for him. So he went with them on July 1. And so for the interim, we have Jill Mannion. She is here with us today, and she is our acting chief of land development. So you'll be seeing a lot more of her. We're going to be thinking over the next couple of months. We have a lot of changes. So as you know, Julia, as we said, was in land development as our planning manager and land development. She is now with obviously zoning as the chief of the zoning division. So we've had some openings now within land development. So we're going to be looking at ways to restructure our processes, maybe again, how we do things within land development. It's just a great opportunity for us on how we do some things. So you may see some changes over the next few months till the end of the year as we settle in. So Jill will be acting chief for the time being, and we'll be looking to fill that position by the end of this year as we fill in some other positions in that division and get things settled there. So we just appreciate your patience as we move through some of these changes. So again, we'll continue to try to move your projects through as quickly as possible, but with the changes, we just, would appreciate just a little bit of grace as we move through these, since we are short some planning positions and we're trying to hire as quickly as we can. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen fast enough for everyone. We don't have the ability to promote from within. So we have to hire positions. And we have to post externally. I just can't say this person's great for this job. I'd like to move them to it. I can't do that. I actually have to competitively hire, and it's the most inefficient process, but it's codified in Howard County. Can't do it any other way. So even if I have someone I'd love to tap internally, which would be my preferred way to do, because there's some great people internally, can't do it that way. Even to move someone from this butt in the seat to the next chair over, cannot do that. So it takes time, unfortunately, even just to shuffle seats around. So again, just give us a little bit of patience, give some patience to Jill. We're really happy that Jill agreed to step up in this role. But it is a temporary role for her unless she wants to come along willingly to the next step. So just again, anything that you have, any questions, concerns, please come to Chad or myself. With any issues that you may have, that's what we're here to do. We're here to help. Jill is here to facilitate with the planners and work with our staff. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over. This is Chad. I'm just sitting up here, so.
My relief. When I need
Okay, yeah, all right. Just tap me in, Chad.
So a bunch of folks looks like have come in. We've gone through just some introductions and things, so you're in good time. You haven't missed much. So we can actually get the show started, and the first real item is with the Department of Health to talk about a couple of changes that we have on the plats. So if you guys, you want to come up here, it's great, and I will just step aside, give you a little space if you want to sit or stand, however you want to do it. Everyone.
To the side here.
I'm Jeff Williams. I'm the Deputy Director, Environmental Health, at the Health Department.
I'm Zach Silvas, Well and Septic Program Supervisor at the Health Department.
So, the main thing we want to talk about is something that came down from Maryland Department of Environment a couple months ago. For those of you who aren't aware at all, we do have on our website, our Well and Septic Program website, a new tab in one of our drop downs as you go below the header paragraph of MDE guidance. MDE has sort of promised to deliver certain pieces of guidance to the health department. And as we get them in final form, we're going to post them on the website. The one piece that we sort of got in final form is something related to health department's signature of record plaques. And I'll back up just a minute in case anyone isn't familiar. We have our local code for the health department, but when we're looking at record plaques, it's mostly related to our role as a delegated authority for MDE. So we're sort of deemed an approving authority. The health officer is the approving authority, and MDE enters into delegation agreements with the health officers of each county to be an approving authority and sort of do some of the delegated work for MDE in the state regulations in COMAR. So in Howard County, the three big regulatory sections that we do delegated work for MDE, at least on the development side of things, is 260402, which is the on-site sewage disposal regs, 260403, which is the subdivision regs as they relate to water and sewage disposal, and then 260404, which is individual well construction. So the record plat guidance is related to the subdivision regs, 260403. That regulation has not been updated, I believe, since it was created, but certainly since the 80s. And just for your awareness, there's nothing that the county health department can necessarily do about that. There's not, we're sort of beholden to what guidance is given to us from the state when it comes to enforcement of COMAR and sort of how we deal with these plats. So this guidance came down to the counties, and there's two big pieces of information in it. The one is they wanted an updated signature block. So traditionally, the health department signature block would just say approved for public water, public sewer, or private water, private sewer, and then a line for the health officer. This new signature block is much beefier than that statement, if you guys have seen it. So the one big thing is take a look at it, make sure when you're drafting plats that you make room for it, because it's like several sentences long now. And there's different categories to choose from in the guidance document. This only relates to record plats, so F number plans. Site development plans, preliminary plans, those can still get our traditional signature block. The F plans, there is currently 7 choices on the guidance document. If it's individual wells and sewage disposal systems, that would be private on-site systems. Individual private wells and community sewage systems. Community, as it's defined from COMAR, is in Howard County essentially just the public system. You know, some counties may have community systems that are sort of small, you know, treatment plants or treatment systems that serve maybe a small town or something like that. But in Howard County, we only have the public system going to the major treatment plants, or what's essentially on-site. And that includes neighborhoods that may have a shared system. So you have a development and maybe 5-6 lots go to a shared, that's still a private on-site sewage disposal system, even though it's a shared private system. So you've got individual wells and septic, individual wells with community sewage, community water and individual sewage, community water, community sewage. And then for the double, the community water and community sewage, they give two versions, one for existing systems and one for proposed systems. My understanding, and I kind of brought it up in our last meeting with MDE and they didn't disagree, is if you're doing a development, a new subdivision, and you don't need to do any kind of extension to the public line to get your development served by public water and sewer. You may need to, tap into it privately, but the county doesn't need to do an extension to get to you. That would be an existing system. But if the county needs to do a public extension to get to you, that would be another option, which is the community water and sewer proposed systems. Then there's an option for agricultural plats or agricultural parcels. And then the last one on this guidance document is titled Property Line Adjustment Plats. And the language of it is specific for lot lines or street lines being changed. But the body of the signature block indicates that because the health department has determined that this minor property line change does not affect water service or sewage disposal, it does not count as a subdivision per COMAR. There was some feedback to MDE that this last sort of category was written specifically to property line changes. So other types of revision plats, like adding an easement or changing a forest conservation easement boundary or something like that, doesn't entirely fit this because it kind of specifies in the language property line adjustment. MDE has given us a new version that is more of that includes the property line, but it has another category that's sort of a catch-all. That's, can be for anything that's adjusting easements or a revision that isn't creating new lots. But that's just in draft form. So I told MDE, we got this meeting today, so if you want to finalize it, give it to us today. And they didn't. So whenever we get it in final form, we will put it on our website, we'll deliver it to the home builders group. And that will be another option to use. But in the meantime, I told MDE, I've just been telling people to use the property line one, even if it's just for an easement or something, and they said that was okay. So again, those last catch-all ones are for properties where you're doing something that requires a record plat, but you're not actually creating new lots. So it's not, by the definition in COMAR, an actual subdivision. So the health department still has to sign it because we have to confirm that what you're doing doesn't affect water and sewer, but we're not signing it as a subdivision. So that's all that. The other thing that this guidance does is it sort of forced the county's hands because there's a clause, a provision in COMAR subdivision regs that all of the counties sort of agreed is kind of outdated based on the processes that the counties have and how long things take. But the subdivision regs, COMAR, state that the approving authority, the health department, has to approve a preliminary plan within 6 months of a record plat, or else it's null and void. A property owner can request a one-time 12 months extension, but that request has to be within the initial 6-month period in order for it to count, to then bump the timeline out to 18 months. But then if a record plat is not approved within that time frame, they would have to redo a preliminary plan. So the county's health departments had lots of questions, obviously, with that. And statements, based on no one gets from a preliminary plan to a record plat in 6 months, let alone 18 months. So we did get, and then the second layer is, does this apply to properties on public water and public sewer, because the health department doesn't even sign preliminary plans, or preliminary plans on public water and sewer. And we don't have any kind of perk cert or something. So we did get some additional clarification from MDE. Number one, properties on public water and sewer, that clause doesn't matter at all. So anything related to this health department approval or preliminary plan doesn't matter if the plat is public. For private water and sewer plats, the clarification we got from MDE is this preliminary plan as it's described in COMAR is not necessarily the actual preliminary plan that the county kind of refers to, where all the agencies sign it. The health department perk cert meets the definition of a preliminary plan in COMAR. It's basically the health department approval of what they call a preliminary plan that has topography at 2-foot contours. It has perk test locations. It's establishing sewage disposal areas, all the things that our perk certification plan does. So we're in the works with sort of a formalized official guidance, but essentially, if we have a perk cert plan that's been signed within 6 months of when we're getting a plat to sign, that counts for this preliminary plan clause in COMAR. So if you're doing a record plat and you know as part of what you're doing that you're going to have to revise the perk cert, maybe you had to shift around well locations or something, or lot lines had to get, tweaked, then you don't have to worry, because we're going to sign the perk cert as part of our review of the record plat, and that's going to be within 6 months of us signing the record plat. But there's other cases where you've got a subdivision and the perk cert was good. So the perk cert was signed longer ago than 6 months ago. What we're going to do in those cases is we're trying to find the most efficient way to essentially reconfirm the perk cert we approved before, to kind of make life as easy as possible on the applicants and not have to have an applicant be charged, more to turn in a new plan that we've already approved. So like I said, we're going to have some official guidance on this, but essentially we are going to have a way to know internally that we've looked again at the perk cert as part of our review process to sign the plat. We've looked at the perk cert on file and sort of reaffirmed it. And MDE said that was okay. I think what we're probably going to move towards moving forward is some sort of we have our normal signature block on perk certs. We may have sort of a second signature block that kind of hangs out that says like health department approval as a preliminary plan, where maybe when we sign the perk cert at first, we don't sign that one. And then when the plat comes around, the applicant doesn't have to give us anything necessarily. We just sort of sign that other block. We're still working that through, because we do want some sort of acknowledgement from the applicant, well, especially from the engineer, saying that all of the things that I certified when this perk cert happened are still the case. If we're re-signing something, we do want the engineer to kind of say, maybe this was 5 years ago, sometimes even more. Are all the site conditions still the same as they were at the time we signed the perk cert? So we're working through the details of how to deal with that, but it shouldn't be as much of a hindrance as it kind of sounds at first. That's essentially it. I'll open it up for questions. Yes.
This is just something that's, it's current. We're, one of our projects, we just made well permit applications.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, the health department is going back to confirm our exhibits and stake out match the approved perk cert.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, that is going to happen within 6 months of the plat.
Right.
So that's where that very well could help set that trigger for the reevaluation, recertification.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're still working through
No,
the
no, it's
details,
just
so
an
that's a good
I'm
idea.
just thinking,
Yeah, no, that's a
you
good
guys
idea.
Gotta figure it out. but
Right.
it's, The well permit applications will, and again, not to say you don't reach out, reach out, let us know what you need, but
Right.
that'll be a decent trigger. That should be pretty consistent.
Yeah, and the
When the
engineer
plans come.
is submitting that
Right.
at this time, saying, at least on
Right.
lot by lot, these are all still the same conditions.
Right, because the wells have to be drilled before the plat.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah,
keep, something to think about.
right. That's a good idea.
Because then again, I mean, literally, we have a perk cert signed in 2023 that just came out of the bin. We're moving to getting wells drilled,
Mhm.
and we'll figure it out, whatever we need to make sure everything's covered.
Right.
I'll be in touch.
Right, right. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Yes.
The process seems to lend itself to a lot of gamesmanship in the sense that, your perk cert, and a good example, Paul's Community of High in the Sky, but if he gets a perk cert in 23, by the end of 23, call it 6 months, he's already got to go back to preliminary because the perk cert is a preliminary plan approval, or he's basically going in day one to kick it out 12 months. And then as soon as you get to 6 months in one day, you're asking for an extension to go an additional 12 months beyond the 12-month extension, because we're talking we're all throwing 5, 6, 7 years out here. And
Yeah.
unless you're in condo regime, there's no way you're going to get from perk cert, which is a milestone, to record plat. You can record a bulk parcel under a condo regime, but to me, it makes,
Yeah.
and this is not driven by you guys. This is just spitballing. How I'm
Yeah.
perceiving it is, we have contractual obligations with the seller based off of timeline.
Yeah.
We have hurdles that we have to cross in order to continue the process, but we have a very unrealistic time frame from when you get a perk cert, quote unquote, preliminary plan to when you have to have your plat
To the
report.
end.
So the timeline does not make any sense to me at all. So
Every county that I'm aware of, out of all of them, said the same thing, that in 2025, that timeline makes 0 sense and is unachievable.
So is there only
across
reprieve to
Um,
ask for extensions the day after a timeline expires?
the state. Well, no, because it has to be within the time, so it'd have to be the day before a timeline expires. But I would say it doesn't necessarily matter, because the good news was MDE said that the perk cert is a preliminary plan by this Comar definition. So we don't have to worry at all about the county preliminary plan in this discussion. So if the engineer, as they're preparing the final plat, needs to revise the perk cert anyway because of changes to SDA boundaries or lot lines or well lines, they, under what our normal process before this guidance came out, that would have proceeded, like we always do. A perk cert comes in while we're reviewing the final plat, we review it, sign it. We get to the Mylars and compare the plat to this new revised perk cert. Under this guidance, that all would have happened within 6 months anyway, so you're good to go. If you have a situation where you got lucky and the perk cert from several years ago is exactly still good based on what your plat looks like now, the only thing we need to do is sort of reaffirm that old perk cert. So essentially, the health department needs to put eyes back on that old perk cert and verify that, yes, this is still approvable, this still meets regulation. The big problem would come if you had a perk cert from, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Regulations have changed since that time. And I guess if you're unlucky, you could have a perk cert and then they change the regulations, you could have a perk cert on Thursday and they change the regulations on Saturday, and then on Monday, you got to deal with it. So whatever the time frame is, if there was a regulatory change between the preliminary plan, perk cert, and the plat, the applicant would have to deal with it before we can sign the plat. I think where this came from in the original subdivision regs was towards that purpose, to not let a health department approve a subdivision and it sits for a really long time. And then when the plat comes around, it doesn't actually meet current regulations anymore. The timelines in there, everyone agrees is outdated. that just isn't gonna change unless or until MDE revises the subdivision regs. They'll probably still keep that in there. They might change the timeframe of it. But anyway, I think the solution isn't gonna be that much of a, like I said, that much of a hindrance at all, or really gum up the works too much.
And it might be my misunderstanding, but a perk cert is a preliminary approval. So when you get perk cert, you have 6 months to get the plat from that perk cert. So then we're ignoring that guideline. We're out of our ordinance. In 3 years, when we're ready for plat, then we go back to you with the good faith that you're gonna reapprove our perk cert? Or are we kicking out every 12 months, the day before the 12-month expires?
No, you don't have to do it like as it goes along.
That's what
You would
it's
just
written,
come
right?
around at the end when the plat. No, it just means after the 6 months, or if you ask for an extension within six, after 18 months, that our approval of that preliminary plan, that perk cert, is not, it's basically null and void for purposes of moving on to the final plat in the subdivision regs. It doesn't mean that it's not approvable to us. It means that we got to look at it again and verify that it is. I think the main takeaway for the applicant and the engineer is, did the regulations change? Yes or no? If the regulations didn't change, then what we approved 3 years ago should certainly still be approvable today. The only thing that would be a problem there is if the regulations change, or if the site conditions changed.
So it takes the grandfathering out. I mean, if you get a perk cert and the county says, we will probably reapprove it, and you get stuck in the wash of things.
Yep.
And 5 years later, it's all new staff or whatever you want to call it, that perk cert is null and void unless you decide to reapprove it. Is that accurate?
Correct, but I would say that we're approving things based on the regulation. So if we had, like you said, staff changes or whatever, if we had someone that was going to try and, interpret the regulations differently than what happened when it was originally signed.
I mean, how can anybody move forward with any confidence on a project? I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like
Right.
that's the first thought I have in my mind is, trust us, we'll reapprove it unless we don't.
Well,
That's very concerning.
Understood. And what I guess what I would like to say about that is what we're trying to do, and certainly what we've been trying to do lately, is make sure that what we're doing, what we're approving, what we're reviewing is based somewhere in regulation or county code. So if something was approvable per the regulation in the county code at one point in time, it should be again at another point in time, unless the regulation changed.
Unless the regulation changes the problem. Yeah, is there any way to explore codifying our county's protocols on, because I've been through this a couple times already with you guys, and it goes back to, well, they're not the approving agency, they are. And I know that was very, very beginning, so trust me, I'm saying this with a grain of salt, but
Yeah.
we don't understand the process. The process is not defined, and risk is the number one analysis of any project. So, if we don't have a surety that something can come to fruition or maybe change drastically and you're going back to the drawing board, it's a detriment to the industry.
Understood. And I mean, again, if the regulation were to change within a time frame, within that several years,
When you make purchase land or put money into.
right, and at the time you bought it, you thought you were locked in. 100% understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're describing as the risk involved in that. Unfortunately, where we are in terms of the health department signature of that record plat, it's as the delegated authority for MDE. We're signing as MDE, so we're beholden to what MDE wants us to do when we're signing a record plat.
So is MDE still the final signator?
They would be if they didn't get delegated to us. So there have been instances where counties sort of, in MDE's mind, went rogue and they took away the plat signature authority from them. So in that county or in those counties, when that happened, the agency or the applicant had to send the plats to MDE for signature before they could come back and continue the process.
And who's the approving authority of the extension?
The health department. The extension is a no-brainer. You know, if you actually were gonna be able to get it done in 18 months, you know, again, unless something major occurred on the site that we were aware of, or unless we knew that the regulations changed, from the Howard County Health Department perspective, that 12-month extension is just, it would be automatic. The regs and the guidance are very specific that it has to be requested by the applicant within the first 6 months. If it didn't say that, then we would just blanket say you have 18 months, because we don't necessarily care. I don't think 18 months is a useful time frame. I do understand where this is coming from, and I agree that 5 years, 10 years would be a useful time frame, that we would want to relook at something and make sure it's still valid if it's sat for 10 years. 18 months is such a short period of time that we would be okay with it, but the way the regs are written, the applicant has to request that extension within the first 6 months. Just, you know, we just have to look at the perk cert again to reaffirm.
And I just see the writing on the wall. You're probably gonna get the day after a perk cert, a request for a 12-month extension, and the day after the 6 month or whenever that time frame is, an additional 12. Like, I just think you're gonna get bombarded with extensions,
Yeah.
and that's probably, you know, that's how I would do it.
It's only one extension.
It is, it's unfortunately, the regs
There
are
is no-
written as
so
a
it's-
one-time.
So from
12-month
perk
extension.
cert to plat, 18 months.
I guess the county preliminary plan would also count. So if we did a perk cert, let's say we did a perk cert in June of 2022, and then we made our way to a county preliminary plan in whatever, October of 23, that would also count by the regulations. So October of 23 would kind of be the clock starter in a case like that. But yeah, the regs are written as a one-time 12-month extension by the applicant. I don't want to minimize what you're saying, and actually what I'm going to do is take, no, it's fine, because this is what we wanted. When MDE didn't give us their little revision in time for this meeting, the good part of that is I can take concerns and questions from you guys and give it to MDE. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this case, is to say there is concern about the uncertainty involved in starting a project, thinking you have this locked in, but then what if, you know, you revisit it a few years later and the health department doesn't like it at that point, and then it has to change around. Yes,
I mean, since you said that, I mean, the county grandfathers that preliminary plan. I mean, that's what we're all expecting. APA holds us up for 5 years. That's okay. We got preliminary plan signed.
yes.
So that's inconsistent with the state. So I think that's a good case to make, say, look, in Howard County,
Yeah.
preliminary plan is it, and this should count.
Yes, and that is another thing that I was aware of this because when we talked to DPZ a while back, when this kind of came out, that was brought up, and I'll reiterate that. The way it was described to me was if you get put into the hold bin, that is the county stopping the clock
Right,
on you.
I see, I'm
Not-
just, right.
Yeah.
I
so-
understand the state doesn't care maybe what the county says, but look, there's more ammunition for you.
And then that gets it even more complicated. You got a force majeure, you know, contingency, whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of, where's that clock stop? Where does it start? When you're in the school bin, when you're not?
Right.
You know, if Howard County signs the perk cert, is it approved or is it still pending on? Like, these are just swirling things that unknowns are really,
Well, the neighbor next door decides they don't like your project.
but there's a
It goes to
loophole
the
where
state.
they can.
Right.
So it
But
just
not-
opens up, that's all. It's a lot of risk for an already really, really risky situation. That's kind of a.
But if I understand, most of the projects are just well and septic, correct?
The preliminary plan clause only applies to private water and sewer,
Right.
private water and septic. So it would also count for the ones that were one and not the other.
Yeah, we don't have many of those, and so I think what the school's been, most of the projects are public. So this would not count for the public.
But what if it was an ARA site?
What side?
Are age restricted?
We don't have schools to worry about, it's restricted.
Right, it's good, okay, yeah.
So,
So I'm
so
saying,
just
yeah,
a little bit of that, like, so I do hear what you're saying, but at least I don't think the bin is gonna be
I'm just
that.
trying to understand.
No, I understand, no, absolutely. So
Um,
when do you anticipate that policy? Because that was one thing kind of going back, Jeff. We had that meeting, we followed up a few times.
Mhm.
When do you anticipate that's gonna cross? That's something I know we're waiting for, too, is the revised policy post our meeting. So it seems like MD is still taking comments. This is one of the avenues. MD is still taking comments.
Right.
They're gonna issue a new policy then revision based on all of this.
I would hope that it's imminent because they gave us a draft version of the revised guidance that included that extra signature block. And it also included the clarification that this preliminary thing does not apply to public water and sewer.
Gotcha.
But any comment, so if you had well and septic, or if you had public water and,
Public water, private septic,
or
or,
vice versa.
Yeah.
So that would still filter through, so it's public water, public sewer obviously is omitted, but
Right.
anything that either has a private well aspect or a private or shared septic aspect is going, okay.
yes,
Just
it's,
new,
it's
that's
part of the
new.
preliminary.
I think we were always talking all projects, but. that's-
Yes, and that
Yeah.
did change because that was, I mean, that was one of the biggest problems from
Yeah.
our perspective is how do you get, how do we find a plan that meets the definition of a preliminary plan on public
Yeah.
for this purpose? Because we don't have a perk cert, so we don't have to worry about that
Good,
piece.
that's good to know.
In any case, when it was one and the other, like half and half, we would always need a perk cert because we need a perk cert to establish well area. We need a perk cert to establish septic area. The one thing I can try and say, and I know that if the regulations did not change and we have an approved plan and we revisit it several years later, if the health department was going to not be approving that would be something that, just to try and put minds at ease, I guess, that's something, and this is the health department kind of doing this as an agent of MDE. That could be something that could be discussed with MDE, you know, if an applicant was upset that the health department was, you know, making new requirements to disallow something that they allowed a few years ago, but the regulations have stayed the same, you know, at those times. MDE is there for either formal appeals or, you know, unofficial conferences to kind of make sure that, you know, have some level of, I guess, confidence that what was approved at one point will be able to be approved again, assuming the site's the same, unless there's some sort of regulatory change that made that not be the case.
I think Jeremy in the back had a question. Yeah.
Well, my guess is this stuff always comes because somebody somewhere did something bad. And somebody's 1985 perk cert got through and they got a legal lot and MDE is coming back and putting guidance on all the counties so it doesn't happen again, right? So I would go back to MDE and go, Howard County does this perfectly. We have the well thing that Paul mentioned. That's the last look. So you're getting another review. We've always had it. Health Department does that perfectly. It's like we're trying to solve something we don't have to solve.
Mhm.
I don't think the issue happened in Howard. I don't think it has anything to do with Howard.
No,
So I think we have the second look. So if we present it back to MD and go, we do re-review this, we can't have a legal lot to sell in any of those 7 categories, right? Till we have water.
Mhm.
We do the water 6 months right before the end. It works for something that's rushing through the process. It takes us 6 months. Nothing probably changed in 6 months, right? Catches that guy that comes in with the 1985 perk cert. You know, he's still got to do a well before he has a legal lot. So it's kind of, I think we're doing a good job, I guess is what I'm saying. Just has to be presented back to them to say, hey, we do have a fail safe. It's already in place and we can prove that it works. Before we worry about having to have other timeframes and all the stuff Taylor's saying that doesn't work. I mean, that's just,
I can certainly, that's something else that I can bring back to them.
plus we get to brag a little bit about what we're doing right. You guys, us guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, agreed. again, yeah, I think you're right. What triggered this may have been some things that were happening elsewhere in the state. But again, it wasn't something that happened in 20 months instead of 18 months. The problem is MDE didn't have the ability or appetite or whatever the reason is to actually revise the regulations. So when they do crack down, it's based on this old regulation that puts this 6 months, 18-month, hard timeline on it. When maybe the problem that you're describing that triggered it is something that was 2 decades, not, 4 months.
Agreed.
So, yes, I will certainly bring these things back to MDE. In the meantime, again, we're, the health department, and this is important for people to know, the health department doesn't have the ability in cases like this to sort of go off the reservation. Because we're basically doing the delegated duty of MDE here, not doing something based on our interpretation of our local code or something. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
On some of those signature blocks, there's an additional signature block for the owner, and I don't have the language in front of me, but it mentions something about that I will certify that this lot will have continuous water and sewer service from now until the solar system blows up.
Yes.
But that water and sewer isn't under their control once it gets dedicated. It's county. So is the assumption then that they're just signing at that time, knowing that eventually it's going to be the county that has to provide that service?
And that was also brought up to MDE. I brought it up in a meeting that we had a little while ago. And the answer was this blurb also comes verbatim out of the regulation. We were basically not following the regulation, by not requiring it on every plat ever since the regulation started. But I think what is the realistic answer is the responsibility travels with the ownership. So whoever owns the property at the time of the plat signature is responsible for having these facilities available. But then when there's another owner down the line, they're responsible. But to your point, they're not responsible for the public service in the street. They're responsible for whatever portion is within that lot. And one or the other, we don't have it too much in Howard County, and it's certainly outside of what the health department deals with. But there's some counties that have had issues with subdivisions that had individual grinder pumps. And a whole neighborhood is constructed with each house having a grinder pump to get to the public line. That grinder pump is a private facility. So I agree that the language isn't great. MDE's answer was we just repeated what came out of the regulation. But I think the intent is not to say that the owner is responsible for DPW providing this water. Yeah. The owner is responsible for the actual portion that's within the private lot.
Yeah, change the ownership that, that makes sense. That's insane. I know I have some clients will say, I'm not signing that. I just wanted to be able to give extra clarification.
Yes. And also to put that point in there, our community services, again, Howard County is used to a community water, community sewer being the public system that DPW controls. A community system can be a privately owned system, and other counties do have those in some capacities. On the well side, you have maybe a shared well system that maybe serves a few properties, but once you get above a certain number of people being served by one well system, it's a community water system. And that is the private ownership. It can be the county that this starts swirling into county rules and who's going to be the owner and the controlling authority. But anyway, that was our answer. Any other? Yes.
Switching gears a little bit, not quite related to that, but back in the spring, we had an SDP that was kind of put in PDOCs and ready to circulate. And we found out that health, and I believe Tim's group in OCS had some type of sign off prior to that, moving on to do the rest of the signature process. I think that you had said that there was no reason for health to have that click off on an SDP. Do you know if that was fixed
PDOC.
in PDOCs so that you aren't signing off on an SDP, or do you know if that went anywhere? I think we held up for a couple weeks before we figured it out.
Yes, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the details of the circumstance.
It was the,
Remind me
we had an
again exactly
SDP, I had emailed and said, health is holding this up, and you said, oh my gosh, health shouldn't have to sign this off, and I think you and Zach were on there, and then we included Linda and Chad,
Mhm.
and, I think the idea was, at the time, was to have you not sign off, or you didn't think that health was gonna have to sign that off.
Yeah,
Do you know if that was ever addressed? Because just for future SDPs and everyone's SDPs in here, I want to make sure, and because I think didn't want to be holding it up. I mean, I think it had said in the system 24 days or 27 days, health was holding it up, and
yeah, I think that was sort of, and moving forward kind of case by case, but I think what happened in the one case was just sort of a perfect storm of kind of, not necessarily a mistake, but the way the process went out. There was a signature request that came from DocuSign on a plan, but it was sort of a revision that health department didn't get kind of that final look at. Usually what happens if I do a final look, I'll tell my boss, the director, hey, expect this DocuSign coming at some point. There was one thing that skipped that and went straight to DocuSign, but then health was kind of on there by mistake anyway. So I think that was just sort of not something to anticipate in the future. In times when the health department does need to sign a redlined SDP, we should be getting notice to review it first. So we would know that the SDP signature is coming. The one problem with the electronic signature process, it's efficient, and I'm sure you guys love it for a variety of ways. What can be problematic is if the signature is going to the director and the director is on vacation, then how do we know within the system that should go then to me instead of the director for my signature, because I'm covering for him while he's on vacation? When we have the process where it's kind of the final review, each agency gets a final review, what I try to do is plop in there, send it says in there, who should we send it to for signature? So I'll put my email in there if I know my boss is going to be off. But then sometimes it gets delayed for some other reason. This happened once. It gets delayed for some other reason. So when I do the final review, I'm thinking, hey, it may come within 2 weeks. I know Mike's going to be out. But then something else happened, and it was like 4 months later that the thing showed up for signature. And I had put his name because I knew he was going to be in, but it just so happened that when it did finally come a long time later, he was on vacation and he didn't see it for a while. So we just have to deal with those kind of contingencies, I guess, internally among the group at DPZ. If something happens and an agency, the health department didn't respond, and just try to reach out to us, email or something, and figure out,
maybe I'll re-email it to you just so you can take a look at it and see. Just, I don't know if you remember the specific example. But I'll send.
Yes, you definitely can. Yes. Anything else? Nope.
Couple takeaways. I saw Jeff making notes there, but, and he said he was gonna go back, but if you guys have any specific questions, if you want that specific question answered, send it to him.
Definitely. And the sooner the better, because I need to try and squeak it up to them before they do finally get us a final version. The final version could come tomorrow, or it could come in December. I can't predict what they're gonna do, so.
The other thing is, I was listening as intently as I could, but there's 7 different blocks now. I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
8,
ultimately
8 blocks. So I could see this being one of these things that they're gonna get a bunch of questions on which block to use under which circumstance. So, I mean, maybe on your website, you could go, private, public, public, shared, whatever the combinations are. Maybe you could attach something in parentheses as a really basic example.
It's not too hard to follow.
Is it?
No, it's not.
No, there's a lot of things sometimes we think it's not hard to follow, but.
I got a water easement plat of revision signed by putting the note 7 on it, which when I said, should I tweak it, Jeff said no, send it in verbatim. And the health department signed it because,
That's great.
yeah, so it moved along.
So if it doesn't become an issue, then they don't have to worry about it, but if it starts, if enough questions come in and it can't be figured out, then
Yeah.
maybe that's one way of doing it, is to put a very simple description.
So,
We can,
Thank you, guys.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 3, Department of Planning and Zoning updates, forest plan tracking. This is just kind of touch base. Right now, when folks need forest banking, we have a list. We're in the 19th century here. We kind of hand out a list with numbers and developers or owners call up to say, hey, do you have any banking we could buy from you? And that's up to the owner of the forest bank. But what I think we're going to do is create a GIS layer that shows the locations of where they exist today. We may still be not quite in the 21st century because I don't think we're going to attach names and phone numbers and, put folks on that list. But I think we're going to at least take the first step and be able to show where these things are located, which drainage areas they're in and so on. That will kind of help out what they're looking for. But I think it's still going to be moving forward, making some phone calls and things like that. So you may see something on there, but we're not handing out private information. So just touching base on that one. Next on the list is solar farm development process. I think, Linda, you're gonna run with that one.
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen just for the viewing audience here. So just bear with me for 1 second here. So many of you may or may not be aware, but effective July 1 of this year, the Solar Certainty, Renewable Certainty Act went into law. How many of y'all have solar projects in the county that you're working on? All right, for energy generation, like community solar projects. All right. So well, that law went into effect. We're basically on areas where it was a conditional use. Now it's you bypass the conditional use process and it becomes more of a permitted use. So we have just put that policy into effect. And so now you do not have to go through our conditional use process and you can come to our process as a by right type of use, as long as you now meet the criteria. Whoops. Okay. As long as you meet the criteria that is sort of set out in the Solar Certainty Act. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and go over the bill as it stands. And we'll be issuing this, we're going to be sending it out today.
Can you do them in state ag easements?
On state ag easements, that's a private contract, so it's whatever the agricultural easement allows. So if the ag easement doesn't allow it,
Right. I mean, you can go to county, but I don't know whether state had changed or not.
I'm not familiar with what the state's policy is. Our county policy, our county agricultural easements do
Right.
allow them. So there we go. All right. Give me 1 second. Let me just get my screen shared here. Jason, can you see that?
There we go.
Yep, now. Okay, everyone can see it up there. Okay, great. Okay, so on May 20th, obviously, this Renewable Energy Certainty Act was signed into law. And basically, this is what I'm calling the community solar project. So it's for that between that 1 and 5 megawatt. And then there's some kind of interesting language about like this inverters and things like that for the 1 to 2 megawatt, and then the 2 to 5 megawatt projects. But really what you need to know, it's anything between that 1 and 5 megawatt solar collector facility by our definition in Howard County. And obviously the law took effect on July 1, and we're issuing our policy memo. So for the purposes of this bill, we define 2 areas between 1 and 2 megawatts, and then between 2 and then less than 5 megawatts. And then these would have gone to our conditional use process through the hearings examiner. So anything that would have gone through that is now bypasses that process as long as you follow the regulations and the processing standards outlined. And this is directly from the House bill. And these are the parts that are pertinent to Howard County specifically, because not everything was relevant to Howard County. And so part of this is you would still have to come in and process just like you would any other plan. Again, you're just, bypassing what had gone through the conditional use process. And you'd still have to come in, start with your environmental concept plan. If you needed any alternative compliance submissions, you would still have to do that. You still have to comply with stormwater management regulation. You would still have to meet your forest conservation requirements. You'd still have to go through your site development process. But here are the processing standards. Basically, you have to provide certain boundary standards between the solar energy station. And they have very specific language pertaining to the nearest wall of the residential dwelling. And then these bulleted points below shall provide a boundary of 100 feet between the solar energy generating station and all property lines that bisect the interior of the project area. And that you shall provide a non-barbed wire fencing only on interior of a landscape buffer or immediately adjacent to a solar energy generating station that is not more than 20 feet in height. That is only black or green vinyl wire mesh. If the owner proposes to use a chain link fence, and if it is not less than 50 feet away from any edge of any public road right away. And the only place that you may use a barbed wire fence is around substations or the critical infrastructure for the protection of that infrastructure. So basically, they don't want you to have these like really obnoxious barbed wire fencing. That you have to provide a landscape buffer or vegetative screening as listed below, and may not require. So we can't ask you to require a berm. Berming used to be really popular where you have these berms that kind of screened from the solar sites. We can't require that any longer. But you have to have the vegetative screening of this subsection shall be required, but be not more than 35 feet. That we have vegetative screening along all property lines, be provided along locations of exterior boundary for the solar energy generation station where existing wooded vegetation at 50 feet or more does not exist. So if you have existing vegetation of this buffer width, then you don't need to plant, but if you don't, you have to plant it. An alternative location within the boundary for solar energy generating station if the owner demonstrated that the alternative location would maximize visual screening. And you have to four-season visual screening of the solar energy generation station. So again, probably have some both evergreen and deciduous, but we don't want these like row of like evergreens installed either. Be placed between any fencing and public view and include multi-layered staggered rows of overstory and understory of trees and shrubs, and then a kind of guidelines of a mixture of what they want to see. May not be trimmed to stunt upward or outward growth to limit the effectiveness of the visual screen, conform to the plant size specifications established in the American Standard for Nursery Stock, and are specified in the landscaping plan prepared by the qualified stock professional landscape architect. So again, you have to have a professional landscape architect prepare that portion for you. And then they want them installed early in the construction process as practical and before the activation of the proposed solar energy station. So they want it early, not late, because they want you to buffer and screen prior to the solar coming online. They want to preserve the maximum extent practical, and supplement it with new plantings where necessary, any forest or hedgerow that exists at a location where visual screening or landscape buffer is requiring. And you have to maintain a 90% survival threshold for the life of the solar energy generation station or a maintenance agreement that includes a watering plan. Part 4, with respect to the on-site solar energy generating station, is proposed for construction. The owner of the solar generating station shall minimize grading, may not remove topsoil, but may move it to temporary stockpiles. To maintain soil integrity, you have to plant native or non-invasive naturalized vegetation or other appropriate vegetative protections that have 90% survival threshold for the life of the energy generating station. And my understanding is the life of these stations are 20-25-year lifespan, so kind of think in those terms. Limit mowing or unnecessary landscaping, may not use herbicides to control invasives. And then here's where it gets a little tricky. Shall post for the first 5 years of the life of the solar energy generating station on landscaping bond equal to 100% of the total landscaping cost with the county in which the solar energy generating station is located. And then the local jurisdictions shall release 50% of the landscaping bond if on inspection the vegetative protections meet 90% survival. And then following partial release of the landscaping bond, the remaining landscaping bond shall be held for an additional 2 years on further inspection and confirmation that the vegetative protections continue to meet 90% survival threshold. Okay, and we're also going to require except as required by law or for safety or emergency, solar energy generating station may not emit visible lights. So they cannot be lighted, no more than 15 feet tall. And then you must mitigate the visual impact from any preservation areas. So this is a little contradictory because we do allow them on our preserved land, but in the state law, they want you to minimize visual impact from preserved land, such as in our case, the Agricultural Land Preservation Program, the county's program, the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, and other county preserved land, rural legacy, county park, state parks, historic structures, list sites or sites eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And you have to provide a solar emergency response services, a map of where they are in relation to where you have EMS or some type of fire department station nearby. And you have to enter into a decommissioning agreement with the Public Service Commission. So that's an agreement with this company and the PSC, which we would require you demonstrating to us that you've entered into that agreement. And then they have certain decommissioning strategies that they want you to show in that agreement. That's with whoever the property, the solar generating company is and the PSC. So then, if you meet above, then you could proceed through our process. So again, you would just submit as normal, meeting all the requirements above. You would just start as you would. One of the things that we're working on is submitting your alternative compliance request along with your ECP submittal to make that process a little more smooth and to go quickly. We do understand that under the new Federal Budget Act, there were some federal programs that were doing some funding mechanisms that are set to expire sooner than I think a lot of people have realized. So a lot of the solar projects that are in the queue, funding might be jeopardized sooner. So we do already have a solar fast track type of process. So we will continue to process these in that policy manner, but also trying to work through the process a little quicker too, with having alternative compliance submitted with the EC. So I would just say, make sure you have your sites scoped out really well ahead of time, so you know what alternative compliances you're gonna need at the ECP stage. If for some reason the state bulk requirements, as they have outlined above, do not meet your solar facilities requirements, and you need to be less restrictive. The state has anticipated that provision. And so, under that provision, if you enter into a solar generating siting agreement with the local jurisdiction, that is something that you could enter in with the county, and we can review what that would be and come up with some type of alternative compliance for that. To be honest, we are still working at what that would be and what that authority would be. The site didn't contemplate how they were going to preempt that with local jurisdictions. So we are working out some of the devilish details on that still, to be honest with you. We are the first jurisdiction in the state that has moved forward with any policy yet. So there is no one else doing this yet. We are the furthest ahead of any county, local government with our solar policy in the state, without even having this legislation and law enacted. And from what I've talked to my counterparts in other jurisdictions and just people in the industry, we're the furthest along with even developing how to even implement this policy. So, that one part piece is going to be a little bit of trial and error. So again, have to bear with us on that. If the properties you have coming forward are in our county ag land preservation program, you will still be required to go to the agricultural advisory board, ag board for advisory comments. Typically, those advisory comments would have been regarding conditional use approvals, but our code still has a provision where you have to go to them for any request pertaining to an easement that is brought forward. So any changes to the easement that comes forward for our properties, including adding solar to the property, would still be required to go to the ag board for the advisory comment. So we are working with our solar policy to change it to give guidance on solar siting, because again, the whole idea is we want to minimize impacts to our farms as much as possible, to keep the soil integrity to where it needs to be. Again, these are accessory uses, so even though it's a use that's permitted within our districts for solar, it is an accessory use. So it's not the primary principal use of the land. And then, as I pointed out earlier, there still is consideration of visual impact to our preserved lands and the general rural area that's even set out in the state law. So that is how we'll be processing these projects. We're finalizing our checklist here. So as you come through with any project, we are finalizing developing a checklist, so that way you, as you put projects through, you know what you need to submit with your project. So that way you check all the boxes essentially for your submittals. So that's all we have. Are there any questions? All this will be posted on our website in the next day or two. So that way you'll have one-stop shopping. It'll be on what's the new page. Just click there. It'll take you to the links for everything. So you have the checklist, you have our policy memo, and you have law to refer back to. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I will stop sharing my screen now.
And she did that all in one breath.
I didn't even take a drink.
Plan processing improvements. So this next part is all about the word timing. So that's what we're about to go over. Some of them are small. Some of them are a little bit bigger. One was just mentioned, but let me just kind of go through a few that we've been working on. Water and sewer plans have been taking over a month to get the original signed. They go out to utilities. I don't know where they go, but they sit there for a while. So I've worked out with Dan Davis that we are going to get as 2 weeks approach. Maury, if we haven't gotten them back yet and you call in, please call Maury. Maury will then call Allison Ford and say, hey, where are we at? Where's the signature? And she's gonna be instructed to get them done and get them back to us quickly. So that will be a couple week reduction as current standards. There are, since I said it was, about a month for those. The other thing we're gonna do differently is we've always waited for those plans, those Mylars to come back to us before we put together the developers agreements for water and sewer. We're not gonna do that anymore. So when that plan gets approved and you guys are getting ready to submit your Mylars, Maury's gonna go ahead and put those agreements, you're gonna have the estimates to us that you've been using. He's gonna finalize, get them all in the right order and get them over to Real Estate Services. Real estate may be waiting for other agreements to come and get in place, but we're gonna get that information over. We've done it in the past because of certain situations and requested, we've done it, it's worked out. A disadvantage is if it gets out to utilities and they say, we need another hydrant, something. And then we'd have to change the cost estimate. You guys have all worked with Maury. He's pretty good. I think it's something that he could probably take care of on its own, add the lead, add the hydrant, change the cost estimate. The dollar amount shouldn't be big. If it's something really big, then we'll get back at you on that and may ask you to update the estimate. But those are two relatively small, but I think they knock some weeks off of timing that can help out. As Linda just said, alternative compliances have always come in with the first subdivision plan, called a sketch plan, an SP or an SDP. Kind of hadn't made sense. So we're going to, and we're still looking into it. We want to make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, but we're going to move those forward. When you submit your ECP, let's get those alternative compliances looked at, especially for these environmental alternative compliances that are taking a long time. You've been having to wait for that ECP to get approved, 6 months, 9 months, start your next plan, get started on that. So we think this is a very large improvement on timing. What it may mean is if you're doing a stream crossing and your ECP has county topo, a comment may come back and say, focusing just on that crossing, can you give us some real topo in there? So just as an example. So we may ask for a little more detailed information in places that you're going to be disturbing, maybe the wetland area or something like that, making sure we know where the trees are, the specimen trees, making sure they're located really well. Not much of a change, but if it's associated with one of those environmental features, we may ask for a little extra. I think it's a real plus, one, timing, but I think it's a real plus because if your ECP gets approved and all of a sudden that road goes from here to here, then the plans don't correlate with the rest of the plans. So maybe we'll have better coordination from that very first plan to the rest of the subdivision plans and SDP. So I hope you guys see that as a real plus for timing. I'm going to keep going. And as far as submitting it, that's going to be your choice. If you guys choose to wait to submit alternative compliances, or you don't realize you need to submit one, something pops up, at least you have the option early. I think a couple of things we're looking at is to make sure you have your pre-submission community meeting done. Currently you do that, then we always advise you to submit your ECP after that. I think the appropriate, at this moment, again, we're working through these, we want to make sure we do it all legally. I think the third step would be to submit that alternative compliance. So have your meeting, submit your ECP, and then right on its heels, then submit that alternative compliance for the environmental features to get that started. But we want to make sure it doesn't look like, you've submitted it in an order that you're asking for forgiveness before we've even seen the plan. Does that make sense? That makes sense, everybody? I see the heads nodding. That's great. Good. A question has come up on a few emails I've gotten looking into concurrent red lines with the electronic process that we now have. So those of y'all that are designing on the outside know that you can get into the GIS, pull out the plans that are downstairs and just start a red line. You don't have to go down, and we don't want you to go downstairs to Terry, start pulling Mylars and making copies, and you can get them right online. That creates a little bit of an issue that we need to work through. So this one, we're still working through some details on it, But that means that Fisher can go pull SDPX, and at the same time, Benchmark can go pull SDPX and start running them through at the exact same time. And one's gonna come in and yours may come in first, yours may come in second, but yours may get ahead of theirs, and we're giving them numbers. You know, this is red line 2, red line 3, and so on. So we're trying to work through that, because the reason it came up is because we're also doing the same thing for water sewer as-bills. You guys are submitting them, they're not part of our process, but we're trying to get that all done electronically. So that's what really brought the concept of multiple red lines coming at the same time. So we still need to figure out a way to make sure that we accept them in the right order and we approve them in the right order. It doesn't happen often. Usually if it's, you know, Acme Engineering starts it, they continue with that red line 1, red line 2, red line 3. So we don't have it happen often, but we just have to make sure it doesn't get mixed up between two different companies.
I also think the owners should be signing off before they submit. We've had situations where different engineers submit red lines and we don't know about it. And it's a problem sometimes. So I think we ought to be.
And you're
signing
saying
off.
from the owners?
From the owner's perspective.
Right. It is part of the checklist. I think we do a pretty good job. I'm sure some have
Okay.
gotten through, but there is to get the owner to sign off on it, as well as a previous engineer. So, and that's one of the things we're kind of internally falling back on. It's like, well, you know, if you use Fisher was the original engineer, we've got to make sure, you know, they're going, wait, we've got one going through at the same time. But yeah, I hear you on that. A couple have probably gotten through or maybe stopped halfway through because it came up. As-bills. Okay, so now the elephant in the room, revising alternative compliance process for the environmentals. Waivers, those are the ones that we're getting 3 directors to sign off on. They are taking about 4 months. That's what we're finding out to get through. And that's 4 months to get you some guidance. And that guidance may not be an approval. It's just guidance. Say, we need this or something completely different, not a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So we're going to make some changes and we're going to try to cut that time in half. Don't quote me on that. We're working through it, but we're going to try to really knock that back. A couple of things that's been going on is that we've been getting submissions from the engineers and there's no alternatives. I mean, it is called an alternative compliance, but there are no alternatives. So Anthony was reaching out and he was saying, yeah, we just got this. You submit it, you go through the intake process, you pay your fees. That takes about a week to get through that part of the process. Then DLD would get it and they would start looking at it and they would go, there's no alternatives. Maybe it was so simple, no brainer, one tree in the middle of the lot, it made sense to you guys, or maybe it was very complicated. But we've been getting a lot of them with no alternatives. So I'm kind of speaking to the developers. Your engineers got to give us alternatives. Let's say 3. I'm just going to pick a number, but let's go with 3 alternatives. Give us those so we have something to present. Because remember, we're taking these up to other directors. So they're coming in and they're being sent up to reviewers for other directors. They, and I'll skip a little bit ahead, they are kind of sitting there waiting for a staff report out of us to get an idea which way we're leaning. But that takes some period of time. So what we're going to do now is if you submit something and you have no alternatives, probably within that first week or 2, we're going to kick you right out. You're done. You're kicked out. We're not going to call you. We're not going to ask you. We're not going to do that babysitting. I'm just going to call it that and move on. We're just going to kick you out. If you submit a couple of alternatives, and I'll go into some options on this, we're going to take it. We're no longer going to call you guys and say, well, these are okay, but they're marginal. Nope, we're going to take it. So developers, I'm hoping you're hearing that. Whatever you submit, we're going to take it. We're going to send it upstairs. And if it's lame, be ready. It's coming back out. Anthony is not here to do that work and reach back out to you. And you guys want it back faster. That's one way that was costing about 3 weeks of time before we could even get it out the door and up to whatever, but to whatever director we had to get it to. So that's going to save some time right there in that first. But submit good stuff. Again, 3 alternatives. So what kind of alternatives are we looking for? Let's start with the easiest one. You got a one lotter, you got a tree in the middle. You guys are looking at it going, I can't develop this lot because the 30-inch specimen tree is there. This is a no-brainer. Everybody should just accept it. You're right. There probably isn't much you can do. You still have to put some kind of narrative so we can sell it to the other directors. Explain the obvious. It's in the middle of the site, the condition of the tree, grading, show the house sitting right there, even if it's paragraph form. It's not 3 alternatives, but this is one of the simple ones. So, but put it in a paragraph form so that folks that don't always look at these plans, some of these directors,
Yeah.
keep it simple so they can look at it and go, yeah, you're right. Because what I'm hoping on those really, really simple ones, we can get to it and get 3 thumbs up on that first letter that goes to those other ones. If we do, maybe, this is where Linda's about to kick me, maybe we don't have to have the formal meeting on the simplest of the simplest.
So I think.
I've heard some feedback on this. I've heard some feedback on this, but-
We have to have a meeting, but, no, but I think to Chad's point is that, you know, have a solid justification. And even if you don't have an alternative to that, give us a good offer up. So what are you giving in place? What is your alternative that you're gonna comply with by taking down that tree? Because look, we have others that we're beholden to that are watching us too. So we have to be able to say, okay, you know, how do we alternatively comply with this part of the code? That's what we have to justify. So in your justification, we took down the tree, we replaced it with this many trees, and here's the justification why. Sell that to us, because that's what we need to sell as well.
Can I add one little thing?
Yes.
So for the simplest one tree in the middle, even if you take your existing exhibit and don't actually change your grade, but you highlight how little developable area you would have left remaining, or how it would be impossible to access your developable area, because that tree is keeping its critical root zone, is keeping you from being able to access, you know, a good portion of your site to have the reasonable development that the law provides for you. So that's the sort of thing. It's just like that little extra bit of effort. So it is so a kindergartner can read it and see it and understand it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, like you said. I mean, like, you don't think, okay, tree, the layperson's like, well, it's just a tree, but then it's that critical root zone, so then that expands out, and then you're only left with X amount of this envelope to develop it, and so.
So like you said, highlighting or shading those developable or non-developable areas, really good. We recently had a meeting with engineers that are sitting here right now on a plan. And I think it was the epitome of what are these alternatives? And let me go through it with you guys. You know, you may be having to put a point of access right here on your plan, and that's where that 42-inch tree is sitting. The alternative to that is, if I go anywhere south of that point of access, I don't have sight distance. Pretty simple. You could actually write that on the plan. We don't achieve sight distance from any point south of it. Any point north of it, we start getting into other trees, or we're into a stream crossing because there's a culvert there. And those types of things put on a plan with some colors added. You know, she said kindergartner view. Okay, that's great. I'm telling you, I've sat in these meetings and my jaw has hit the table a couple of times. Some of the things I've heard, you'll be amazed what some pretty colors will do and help you guys out. That's one alternative. Point of access, if that's creating one of the waiver requirements, show us it has to be there. If your utilities are leaving the site somewhere and you can flip the utilities with something, this was the exact example that we had on one. We had the meeting and the directors are sitting there and you could just see the light bulbs coming on with the alternative. But this alternative was submitted as part of another meeting. But oftentimes now you're reaching down into those lower areas. That's where your wetlands and your buffers and your steep slopes and your trees are. And being able to shift a utility and flip a lot can save you some of that trees. I wish I could say if you had 10 trees and you knocked it down by 22%, we're going to pay. It doesn't work that way. I wish I could say that. It's not like engineering where it's like, you know, you can get so much water through this pipe. but we need to see those alternatives. I spoke to another engineer who's not in here right now and said, Chad, I can give you 10 bad ways of doing it. We don't keep those. We throw those away. We sketch them up and we throw those away. Well, not that we want to see 10
Yeah.
bad ways of doing it, but that is part of the alternatives, that you looked into those ways and they really are bad. You guys spent days looking at this, creating it, and then realized this is a bad way of doing it. The directors looking at this, they get to look at it for a few minutes, maybe with their reviewer, or maybe with now Jill possibly, and the DLD reviewer. But you guys have been looking at it for days, so the no-brainers to your all's engineers, they still need to be presented. So it doesn't hurt to present that. So points of access, seems like it creates lots of issues. Places where the utilities are leaving the site also seems like it create a lot of either necessary disturbances or waivers. So just giving you a couple of those examples, it can be done right on those sheets. It's going to help a lot. So our goal is to get it in and get it out to those directors, reviewers, so that they can get together. And in that 2-week period, and that's what it's always been, 2 weeks, to get it back to us so that DLD can put together the staff report of what those alternatives are. Now, it's going to take a little bit of arm twisting on our side to have those other directors get those alternatives that they want to see that might be different than yours. But as many as you can cover, it will take out those alternatives that they're requesting. And then we can get it out to you. And that's why I'm saying I think we can get it in a lot less time. I mean, 16 weeks, 4 months, that's a long time. That's what we're reaching for. And I think that will help you guys a lot. I'll quit talking. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on the water and sewer?
Quick question about that.
Sure.
Do the other directors of the 3 directors read the engineer's justification, or are they only looking at the technical staff review?
I can't speak for that.
Because sometimes meetings, I'm explaining the exact same thing I wrote in my justification, but their light bulb goes off in the meeting. Like, I wrote all this down previously.
We can't.
Did you
I
not
can't
read?
speak
Yeah, do it in
for
color.
that.
Do it in color.
So Dave,
I know,
I'm really to the point, I've been here a long time. And I'm usually to the point, so I'm at a point now where I'm gonna ask them, guys, we need your alternatives back. You can't just sit and wait for us to give you this. I tell you, DLD, the ones I've sat in, this is A+ work that's coming. You've seen the staff reports. It's tremendous the time to put all that information together. And you're right, if people read it, you will have a really good idea of what's being asked for and why it's being asked for. We do need the alternatives. We're gonna get you there. But they do tremendous work. And I think if people spent more time reading that, I think the meetings will go faster, and I'm not afraid to say it. So
Well, Jill mentioned kindergarten, I think, so. I think
we're trying to get it to the
I
fifth
was
grade.
really good at kindergarten.
Like, even for the common citizen, because this is all public record
Yeah.
too, and, we're getting it from both sides, we have lots of citizens, we have council members who are hearing it from their constituents about, development concerns and whatnot. And, waivers or alternative compliances are just a super easy target. So the more that we can firm up the record of why we are approving certain types and we are doing it in a consistent manner, the easier it is for us to at least explain it back to council, explain it to constituents.
100%. I mean, like I had budget, talking about our budget. We ended up talking about alternative compliance process. And for the past 2 years in a row, council members want to daylight this process because they don't think that we are doing enough for alternative compliance. And what I had to explain to them was, no, we do a lot for this process. If I had to daylight it, you think 16 weeks is a long time? It would take 6 months or more to get through this process. So we're trying to balance by making the process be very thorough, but also go as quickly as possible. And so, we do have discussions, we do read the reports, we do talk about alternatives, because it is very much scrutinized by the public, by council, to make sure that we are making the best decisions possible. And it's something that everyone very much is very interested. We have a tracking, a dashboard on our website because that's how much interest it is to take down a tree in Howard County. And, you know, those are all good, thoughtable things, but it's also a lot of pressure for everyone on how we do things. So,
Yeah, we need to help you or help.
correct, help me, help you, help
us.
me.
Exactly.
Right, help us. Correct,
Which I think everybody's on board with.
exactly.
So those are some items, you know, that I wanted to go over as far as plan process. That I think really does, if you kind of put all of them together, starting with the water and sewer, I think we can make a good dent in some of the timing. I know there's other items. I've gotten some emails and letters and, you know, we got 25 minutes, you know, pull your darts out. Let's talk about a few other items. And before we do, I wanted to talk about design manual waivers. We talked about alternative compliances, design manual waivers. I put together just really lame. Jim's gonna pull it up on the screen if he can. We've been looking at some timing and I just took, I think it's maybe like 6 plans. Yeah, there it is. 6 plans that design manual waivers came in.
Even on
Don't
my
make it
screen,
too big,
Jim,
you'll
I
be able to
literally
see it.
need my magnifying glass.
Um,
Killing me here.
Design manual waivers came in the ECP, probably about 2 years ago. DED, because we're the ones looking at design manual waivers, started asking you to put a comment on the plans that say, do you have any anticipated design manual waivers? If you do, list them. I didn't say, you know you need them. I didn't say submit them. And I said, well, you know you need them, but do you anticipate needing any of them? And if you don't, I need you to say that you don't anticipate any. So things change as you go through the design process. I get that. But we're looking at an ECP going, I think I need a waiver for that. I think I need a waiver for that. So, you know, at this point, we went back and looked at what round, and I just took plans, you know, just arbitrarily picked plans. At what round were we seeing these design manual waivers coming in? They weren't coming in with the first round. So they were coming in with the second, third. We got a plan in here 5 rounds now, and we're still going, you know, we could approve this because this is a waiver that we typically grant. So we feel like it will be granted, but we still don't have it yet. So if you guys you can help yourselves out by getting them into us in that first round. That's great. You know it's coming because we hit you up for almost every ECP. We've made that brought up the question of what we're going to see. I kind of feel like we have to find them, and you know they're coming, but we have to go find them for you and say you're going to need a waiver for that. So get them to us on the first round. I think it'll really help you because it's a whole nother process running parallel to that process, and we can't approve your plan until that happens. Jim, can you bring up the other one? And can you, and I'll let you go through it. Jim did a better job coming up with more numbers than I did. Sorry.
Yeah, this is, sorry for the scale, I didn't think about this, so. Chad said he had asked me, if there were some concerns about the processing time for the signature processing time, and, there's some concerns that it might be taking longer, the digital signature process as it's compared. So,
It's still small, it's still small.
It's getting very.
there's a delay, sorry. Alright, so I'm just gonna scroll a little bit, so anyway, so what I did was just a really quick comparison. I went in the database, that we have all our scan drawings, and I just found I just found a group of, I just went in order, found a group of road construction drawings, actual road drawings, where, we went through the digital signature process, and that's what this represents here. There was kind of one outlier. But there were some complications with the project. It was a larger project. It was very complex. So average time without that project was about 30.4 days. With it, it's about 52 days.
And that's just for the road plans, right? Just the road.
Just the road plans.
When you
Correct.
say data is received, is that after you've gotten your checks and all that good stuff, or is that, what's that
That was accepted through, PDOCs, accepted in PDOCs to start the signature process, so it would be received at least.
Right, because it takes a while before it gets to that, it takes some time as well.
Correct. So, and then, so in comparison, if everybody's looked at this already for a couple seconds, zoom in on this one a little bit. And this one has a little bit more because this is the older process where we would just, the hand signatures, wet signatures, whatever you want to call it. So the other list didn't have as many because we really haven't had that many road construction drawings where we went through that digital process. So
Might have some COVID in this one.
what's that?
Might have some COVID in this one these days.
Yeah. So this is showing about 79 days average time. There are some outliers there, that some larger ones there, 160, 136, different reasons why. But even if we did account for those as compared to, 52 days, 30 days, it is getting better. But like I said, these larger projects, I know sometimes you want to get these things through fast. Depending on how the plat's going through developer screens and everything, there's minor revisions that have to be done, whether or not it has to go to the health department. There's a bunch of different variables that might affect the project, but, so that's just what the data shows. So, like I said, I just pulled, it wasn't random. I didn't pick out certain projects. I just went down the list. That's all I looked at, so.
Now, within that, there are so many steps, as Jim said, with, getting through outside health department, outside agencies, getting the checks in. There are a lot of steps, but I think the electronic process, when everything is going smoothly, it is very efficient. It comes in, I signed them for a year in my old position. I'd bring them up, I'd go grab, the reviewer from DED, maybe Heather, I'll grab Heather. We'd come in and we'd just sit there and we'd be like looking at it going, okay, did they get that last approved subject to comments? And then we would jump to sheet 3 or whatever sheet, and she goes, yep, right there, see, we got it. So, I know I had in the past with wet signatures, I would look at a Mylar, and even with those, I would see something that, it was more of a detailed item, and I had stopped you guys and said, hey, I need you to hand draft something on it. Or oftentimes I had asked you, can I hand draft something on it for you? And we would work that out and make it happen. That type of thing actually should be happening less with the electronic signatures. There is that week time that it gets weeks time, as in 1 week apostrophe S, that it comes in and our reviewers have that 1 week to look at it to make sure those approved subject to comments got done. So that's a whole week. That's 5 days of it, just sitting there. Somebody's looking to make sure they got done before they punch it into me or to Jimmy now or to Jill, to make sure those last couple of steps are done. But once that's done, if all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, it literally is just clicking a button, because you really can't dive into it and see it much the way I used to be able to when I'd see the Mylar. So I could, give it another review. So when it works really, really well. When there's a glitch, like, I don't want to name projects, try not to do that, but when just something is outstanding, it gets put on hold and we have to wait for something to get done, a developer's agreement. So I think it works well. There are issues. Steve, you had brought it up with me. You and I talked about. There are issues.
Getting checks is an issue. If nobody's there to take the checks and cash the checks and all that costs us time a lot of times. I don't know, we can do it online submission.
We're
That would be,
working on that to accept online payments.
Yes.
We're getting there.
that could help a lot, I think.
So, you had also brought, you used the word ambassador.
Yes.
And you brought up somebody that used to work here, that you guys would go to, and he would come around and kind of get things, coordinated, shaken loose, whatever you want to call it. I wish we had the people to do that. The closest thing we have are the DLD reviewers that are in charge of the process. They do a really good job that you don't see, coming to us and shaking our tree to say, my date is coming up, I need this. Some of them we get done quickly. Others get close to that deadline date. It could be waiting because we're waiting for the water and sewer. So that's why I addressed the water and sewer first, in this earlier conversation.
Well, it's kind of two different people. I mean, one guy used to have the authority and say, look, agency, I know you guys are fighting over this. We're gonna come up with a solution now, and we're done, it is done. And that was wonderful. Whichever way it goes, it's done.
Yeah.
That's the one guy.
I'm
The other-
not him,
No,
but I
I know.
might be about as close as you
Yeah.
can get,
I
and
mean,
you
that's
guys know you can email me, and you do.
Right.
And I'll try my best. I'm definitely, I don't work the way he did, but I get it. There's a process and we've got to get to the end of it. So I'm willing to, stick my head out there and call people and try to get things taken care of.
And the other ambassador is just somebody who was on the project to say, hey, this is where this project is at any particular time. So the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. It's amazing to me sometimes that the county really doesn't know what each other's doing. I mean, we deal with all the departments all the time, and so we kind of get the big picture, but sometimes they don't know.
I think that was the intent with project docs, is to be able to track a little more, but I guess it's really not. It's not really do that as well as I think everyone had hoped.
Well,
would do.
it can, but we have so many projects going on. I mean, that we don't track it and go, oh my gosh, we're at the 36th day. So we're not tracking it that way. It's when things start hitting the fan and we hear from you, that's when we go back into that one and go, oh, we're at the 36th day. I haven't heard anything from water and sewer yet. Maury, call up Allison, find out where they're at, get them back in here. Can you go ahead and start the estimate? Let's just get it over to them. Nothing's going to change on this job. Okay, I'll reshuffle and I'll put that one on top and try to get something like that. So project docs is great for that, but it's not like it's blinking red for every, feels like it is on every step, but it's not every step that allows us to have something blinking on our screen to track it. So, Steve, this is what you sent me. I read through it. Are there other items?
One other
Checks
thing-
was the big one. Checks was the big one to get it, the timing. People aren't sitting at their desk.
The other thing is with all these energy saving days now, which are magically right next to the holidays. Is there a number we can get for somebody? They're gonna answer that number because I think we have and do we know what their hours are? Because
Steve is, we're working, everyone's working, there, no one's off, you call the main line, that phone is to be picked up, so if someone's not picking up, let us know, send me an email, but everything's working, they have their jabber, I mean, we're on, it's not like anyone's off.
well, I know, I know. I just know practically how things work too.
And I know I will call, a lot of reviewers on those days and I leave a message. And what's really interesting is that 2 minutes later, they're calling me back. So I don't know why it didn't pick up. Maybe they just wanted to hear the message. Now I'm doing it on my cell phone, which I think most people in this room have, unfortunately. But they call me right back,
Yeah.
so I think they are.
Sometimes where it doesn't ring.
What's that?
If for some reason it doesn't ring, it goes directly to voicemail sometimes
Yeah.
and I'm not, it's not every time, I'm not sure why it happens. Maybe sometimes there's 2 calls coming in at once.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're on the other line, sometimes we're doing something on paper and
Yeah.
our computers log us off pretty fast for security purposes, so we have to log back on. We hear the phone, but we can't answer it in time for, so there are reasons, but we are definitely
We're
working.
working, I mean, we did not miss a beat, we were, the office was closed for a whole week. I mean, we all have Jabber, which acts just like our typical telephone. So if you can't get a hold of someone, just email me straight away and we're always on, so.
So you should leave a clear message to give that person a time to call you back. It's like Jill said, if we're multitasking, we have one screen, we might miss the call or we're on a call. We're on calls way more because we're all remote. So give us a chance to call you
Yeah.
back.
So I have a question on, I get 2 types of TC letters now. Most of the time I get a TC letter for any plan, SDPF plan. It says approved, subject to resolution of the remaining comments prior to submitting the originals. Fine. Sometimes I get one that says I have 2 weeks to resolve those comments. And then I'm told that's not a hard, fast rule, but it's written in the approval letter. And the reason I'm asking this is because one of those plans is gotten appealed, the approval's been appealed. Luckily, I have verification that I did it in 2 weeks, that email verification. My question just is, where did the 2 weeks come from and why is that showing up sometimes and other times not?
So the 2 weeks typically is only for things like a sketch plan, something that has a much quicker O's signature turnaround time. If you remember back when we were doing lots of directs, when we were all on paper, you would have the 45 days to submit your direct revisions as you were preparing either the road construction drawings or getting started for your developers agreements. And that was so that we could finalize the cost estimates and things like that. So that 2 week timeframe came from that period because the sketch plan didn't have to go through all that. And we only had 45 days to get the original in, so we needed 2 weeks. I don't know, I'd have to take a look at the formulators. We've been working hard on trying to modernize a lot of them and bring them up into, you know, our current work processes, but it is an ongoing project for us. And Julia did a lot while she was with us to really update a lot of the formulas, but there could be a few that people are pulling that has some of the old language too. So if you have a project number that you have a specific question, you know, that you could shoot an example, we can take a look.
We've gotten a few of them on for 2 weeks.
And it's not a sketch plan? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can find. Okay.
And then just on that same vein, I mean, we're running out of time. This is more just a high level question. So from TC to plat recordation or TC to developers agreements, or, you know, every site's different, SDPF plan, but is that being looked at? Because we've had some recent instances that, you know, we're not perfect, nobody's perfect, there's reasoning behind it, but some of it pretty excessive as far as additional just comments coming. So on plat plans, on TC plans, we always want to do the right thing, but, you know, is there a point where the comments stop? Or we work through it without stopping the process? Because that has been problematic, I would say, over the past couple of years. And, you know, there's many, many reasons for it. There's no one silver bullet, but it's difficult because, you know, you have obligations to sellers, you have obligations to lending facilities, you have many, many things that are relying on. A TC letter used to be, you're good to go. And now it could be anywhere from 6 to 12 months potentially. So
I know we've had one big, very large project come in. There were extra comments that were put in at the end because how 100-year stormwater management does versus floodplains, because one was setting the parameter of the other. And some changes did occur on the site. So it was a lot. I agree. It doesn't happen often, and we had some meetings. We met with the engineer, with the reviewers, worked through it. It's something that is, when you get that TC and you get those extra comments, you got to give, let's say it's in DED, give Jim a call right away. Let's make sure we dive into what they really are and make sure we understand whether they are the important ones or not. Because if it's the job I'm thinking of, we had some very long meetings afterwards, and several of the comments were agreed upon and we did them. And I think they were reasonable to ask for. And many of them were like, we really don't need it. We're going to let it go. And we worked through them, but it was painful, long meetings doing it.
And it's just, I guess, more highlight. It's just the understanding of the problem.
You make a good point too. I think part of it, Chad might kick me for this too, you know, and I think and look, we're trying to still, Project Docs is an interesting program. And we've had a lot of new reviewers, not just in our department, so to speak, but also in some of our sister departments as well, where when something is advisory versus something that is necessary. And I think it's just hitting that advisory.
And
it doesn't come through that way.
Then, yeah, we can address them appropriate, yeah.
Correct. I think that's something that we've been trying to train some of the other departments on, like, that should have been an advisory comment, and it comes through as a required comment. And we've been working with them on training them on PDOCs on how to use that too. So we understand that as well. And we've been working with them on, like, that wasn't really required.
Yeah,
but
that
that's an
was-
advisory requirement. and they're coming in late, we know that too, so we've been talking with them about how to address this as well. Yes, that's another thing we've been talking to them about is hitting the resolved button. Yeah, we've heard that too a few times. So as good as technology is, it's only as good as the person using the technology. Pardon me?
It's still people.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, yeah, so we're all trying to just, everyone keep on top of it, and there's turnover in different departments too, and, you know, they're not with us all the time, so we're just trying to work with them as well.
It's amazing that a $50,000 check for clicking a button that says resolved can both hold it up the same way.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
I was gonna close my little part with, you know, the water and sewer stuff. I think we made some good strides. Taking alternative compliances with ECP. Don't overload us on that. Don't submit it yet. Give me a little bit more time to lock in that process to make sure we're good, but it's coming. You know, I think that's a really big one. I think that one really can get us, you know, or get you guys into a process, keeping plans coordinated as you move through the process. You know, I think we have a couple good things we're putting out there for this meeting. I'm hoping you guys feel the same. We've touched on some of your all's issues and requests. It's a lot of moving parts. So we're doing what we can. So I just wanted to kind of put that back together.
One thing I'd want to throw out there for you to think about. PDOC's final signatures, all black and white. With the technology, the plans look good with some shading, a little color. I'm not saying red should ever be one of them. But the plans are reviewed in color.
Mhm.
And then we have to change it to black and white, which isn't as simple as it sounds, but it, you know, we comply. It
So
just seems like it's,
So if you had a green shading,
that's right.
you're using that color because of its density and line weight, right?
Right.
Line weight, and so, and it makes a good shading,
Right.
color, okay.
Just something to think.
Yeah,
about, just saying.
yeah, I'm not saying why it can't be done that way. Now, a red because
Right,
that's.
obviously.
We'll have to see.
The platform, very good. Health department wouldn't, I mean, not health department, the director wouldn't, but color.
Huh?
It's an accessibility issue, like
I'm
from
not
color
sure.
brightness.
Now, again, I don't know exactly why.
Yeah,
I'm just
we'd
saying.
have to see what Evolve
Yeah.
can do with that.
Yeah.
No,
And I know at one point it was coming upstairs from Terry, and
Right.
maybe it was the old way we were printing things out, and he just, you know, it turned black on him or something, so we
right, I
just,
don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know why,
you know.
just something.
We can check into it.
Concurrent red lines, if
Yeah.
if you're house siting, you know, and you're gonna use the same engineer for all of them, you know, give Jim or myself, give Jim a call and say, we're gonna use, you're sitting in front of me, FCC for all of them, you know, can we do them concurrently? We can probably figure that out for you because they're usually like we don't have them anymore, but a house type revision that goes through pretty quickly, and we can then know it's coming, we can track them and keep them in order. So here comes the first one, red line 1, red line 2, 3, 4, and keep them in order. But give us a call if you know you're gonna use the same engineer. We've done it. We've made it happen.
Well, we're at time. Anything else, folks? Just feel free to email us or call us up if you have any questions. You know where we are.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll see
We
you.
appreciate it.
All right.